is called Twilio. Twilio helps automate a lot of workflows for companies in terms of OTP, SMSs, push notifications, all of that, so that developers don't have to build those stuff themselves. They can just plug in Twilio's APIs and their SDK, and it does all of the work for them. Twilio grew from about $50 million in revenue to about $3 billion in a span of 7 years. Now, I suck at math. There are a couple of us here, 2 of us in the room who have failed math 8 times. And that's not even a joke, it's just sad. So I'm not going to calculate 50 to 300 is how much, but it's a lot of money, $3 billion in revenue. Similarly, we have Stripe, where revenue grew from 40 million to 400 million in 1.5 years. If you can 10x your revenue in 1.5 years in SaaS, all of you should be looking for jobs in SaaS like right now. It's the place to be in the current tech market. Some of the famous Indian SaaS companies, Razorpay is a classic one. They provide payment software that any company can just plug into their existing e-commerce model and just work out of the box. Haptic is another famous one. They handle chatbots for businesses. Right now, if a business wants to have a integration with WhatsApp, SMS, Facebook, they don't actually have to do it themselves. Haptic does it for them. Freshdesk was another lesser known one, based out of Chennai. 90% of all support agents that you talk to in most Indian apps are Freshdesk. But you go on Swiggy and you tell them कि मेरा order खराब था, that is Freshdesk handling all the communication end to end. Firebase, does everyone use Firebase? At some point you all heard of it, right? Now, I know Firebase is not an Indian startup, but we Indians will have to make सुंदर है ना उधर, तो हमारा Indian ही बन गया. That's our default mentality. But Firebase is probably the most popular SaaS offering out there, offering everything from storage to analytics, testing, configuration, all of that. So here's roughly what SaaS products look like. How do you actually build a successful one? I think broadly, this is not just SaaS companies, but any company that you get out there to build. How many of you want to be founders? I'm not going to ask why, because I know why. Everyone's seen Shark Tank and with the $1 billion funding coming in. It's a great journey to be on. This is my 3rd company that I founded. It is difficult. You have to balance a lot of real life problems and your actual work. And sometimes you have to make trade-offs that don't work. But in the end, it's very rewarding. Right? Because what you have built from the ground up, you start seeing hundreds and then thousands and then millions of people using it. That journey is very fulfilling. And of course, the paycheck helps, but the journey is very fulfilling. To succeed in any founder journey, you need a bunch of things, of which I think there are top 4 that I recommend. One is have a deep understanding of the market you're building in. Don't just think कि मुझे idea आया and I'm just going to start building it and फिर देखते क्या होता है. Those never work. You're either going to run out of money or you're going to run out of patience before you actually get any success. So when you want to start building something, any product, any business, any idea, start by doing an in-depth dive into the particular market. You understand it end to end, talk to people who are within that audience segment, understand their day-to-day problems, and then you will succeed. One classic example I keep going back to is about 9 years ago at this point, I had a chance to work with the team from Indicator. And when we were building that, we were designing that product, we were actually sitting on station platforms talking to people who are getting into trains. It was not sitting in an office with fantastic lighting and thinking that we know what's happening at stations. It was actually going to stations and talking to people. 90% of the time people said कि मेरा train आ रहा है जाने दो. Or they said I'm not interested in your product. कुछ बेच रहे नहीं थे. It's just India's default response when someone comes to them with a phone, they're like, I'm not interested. But the 10% of feedback that we got was massively insightful. It helped us shape the kind of problems that people go through, which helped us understand their day-to-day journeys. And because of that, it is as successful a product as you see today, market understanding. Second is an actual business model. A lot of people think that in the startup world, it's okay to start building your idea and then raise funds somehow magically to succeed. And then feel they can get salaries and bills and all that. That's not a ideal journey. Right? We're not having a magic show here where suddenly some investor is going to come up and give you a check and your idea is going to work. From day one, when you're starting to build an app or a business, have a business model. How are you going to price this? Where is the money going to come from? If you are relying on investor funds, how long can you run without investor funds? Backup plan, what happens if you don't raise funding? All that should be part of your founding journey right in the beginning. Keeping it as an afterthought is a guarantee that you will fail 6 months, 12 months, 18 months down the line. And last is of course a well executed sales strategy. So you know where the money is coming from, but you actually have to go and put some effort into that. A lot of businesses think that I'm going to put money into Google Ads or Instagram or Twitter or talk to my friends and post it on social media and वहाँ से customers आएंगे. That never works. That's not a sales strategy, that's a sales attempt. Get someone to work for you who knows how markets work, who knows how marketing works, how advertising works, and have an entire strategy built around sales. Trusting luck and fortune to actually fulfill your customer acquisition is a guaranteed way to set yourself up for failure. Couple of other things that I learned at Ripple, is the current company that I'm building. One is the concept of an ICP. So I have launched 2 companies so far. I didn't learn this until halfway through my second one, and I actually perfected it at my current one. But we have all heard of personas as a concept, right? The kind of ideal user that who will use our products. The sad reality is that user is not definitely a paying user. Right? You might build your app for a target audience, but your target audience may not be your actual customer. So in addition to just a target persona who will use the app, you also need to have an ideal customer profile, because they're the ones who are actually going to bring in the money. It's okay if your product works really well for 10% of your audience, if those 10% are the paying audience, because that's what's going to help you succeed. Another thing to note is that a lot of things that I'm saying today are very anti what the tech world thinks. Right? A lot of designers say that design for 90%, forget the 10%. First design for the user, think about sales strategies and all later. But this is a Dhanda talk. Right? We are from Bombay. I hope everything here is about actually making businesses work. If you go to Bangalore and you're building just tech from the ground up, maybe the environment there is one where you can think of sales or investments later, but here we're all about building businesses. So if your app has to optimize for the paying customers first, make sure you know who those customers are. It doesn't necessarily have to be your primary target audience, but it is an important part of your entire journey. Because knowing who your customer profile is will shape everything going forward. Maybe you're building, say, a next flight booking app or a travel app. If you're selling to enterprises, you're going to be a web product. If you're selling to consumers, you're going to be a mobile app. Identifying who you're selling to just changes your entire product what you're building. Right from your tech stack to the people you hire to the platform you ship to, everything is affected by it. Right? If you go and look on pure instinct, persona based, you're going to think सबका phone, सबके हाथ में mobile है, everyone is on their phones all the time. Of course, I'll make a mobile app. But enterprise customers don't actually use mobile apps for booking. They're pure, forget laptop, they're pure desktop users. Right? So figure that paying customer out, optimize heavily for them first, and then focus on the rest of your audience. The other thing, and I spoke to someone about this just before my talk, but it's important, I keep bringing it up in almost every talk that I do. Every entrepreneur out there, all of you who are also want to be entrepreneurs, this is a bunch of lies that you tell yourself. And until someone points them out to you, you're not sure what they are. One most popular one is that someone will steal my idea. If your idea, your business idea or your app idea is just something that someone can just steal and copy and do better than you, then you need to spend more time on it. If you look at some of the biggest successes in the world out there, they're all shitty ideas. Google is just a front page for the internet. It's just one search box. Amazon is just taking books online. SpaceX is just reusing rockets. None of these are groundbreaking or innovative ideas. It's the execution that actually changed everything. So if you are telling yourself that my idea is very valuable and if I want to steal it and build something that competes with me, remind yourself it's not the idea that matters as much. It is likely more the execution that matters. And if you talk to more people about your idea, it will get better. Maybe someone steals it in the process, but the feedback that you get, the conversations that you have, will teach you just so much more about what you're building that it is way more valuable than keeping it to yourself and hoping it will work. There's a bunch of more lies. I won't spend too much time on this. One other of my favorite ones is I have a patent for what I'm building, or I'm building before the large companies like Google and Amazon and Facebook can actually do it. Again, massive lies you're telling yourself, because one, if you're relying on a patent to keep your idea unique, that's not going to happen. You cannot afford to fight a billion-dollar company in court with your one piece of paper which your patent is written on. They will drown you in legal fees, and they will win regardless, because you just won't be able to afford fighting that kind of company. Instead of using your patent as a shield to protect your idea, again going back to the conversations that you have, the execution, that should protect your idea, not just a piece of paper. Second, if you look at larger companies and you think you're doing something faster than them and speed is your only real value, go back to the drawing board. Get more of a uniqueness than just speed. If you look at just how the AI environment has been from January to May, and then May onwards, it's a massive difference. January to May, OpenAI was the king of everything. ChatGPT became actually synonymous with the word AI. A lot of people stopped saying AI, they were just saying ChatGPT. Right? Because OpenAI innovated faster, they hit the market earlier, they let people play around with it. The moment someone like a Google steps in, there is an inherent trust that people have with Google. That is one. Second is, overnight, their solution starts plugging into everything that you already have. Docs, email, keyboard, all of it gets their product overnight. So yes, you might be faster than bigger companies, but the moment they actually start building, the amount of inertia that they have, they will catch up, because they have an ecosystem which you don't. So have more uniqueness than just speed. And find your niche. Don't try to build something that appeals to a very large set of audience, because you will run out of resources catering to all those people. Instead, find a small set of users whom you can build something for and perfect your solution for them. Once you have that confidence that I can do something really well for a segment of users, then expand. From day one, if you try to build for everyone, you're just setting yourself up to fail. So coming back to APIs, that's a bunch of entrepreneurship stuff, which I kind of bored myself in the process, but okay. Who actually pays for APIs was one of the questions I asked myself when I started building an API product. If you look at classic APIs that all of you have probably used in side projects, things like weather APIs or clock APIs or even your native Firebase APIs, you can use it for free, right? But that's because you're a hobbyist or a side project or a student developer. Enterprises, like I said about Stripe and Twilio, are paying billions of dollars. So to answer the question, almost every tech industry that's built out there, even if it's something as simple as push notifications, their bills for APIs are in millions. Right? So don't doubt that people actually pay for this. There's a massive market out there for it. How do you actually price these APIs? So almost every SaaS product has a page that looks something like this, right? Where they have multiple offerings. They have one personal plan at $0, a business plan, a price plan. But it's not just that simple. They're not just putting numbers out there on these pages and hoping that it works. There's an entire science behind pricing of APIs. There are 3 C's of pricing which you can use to sort of shape what your revenue is going to look like. So either you're differentiated from other products, can be the cost. maybe you're doing the same kind of thing that someone else is doing, but you're massively cheaper. That can be one way that you approach your pricing. The other can be capability. Maybe you're doing the same thing as someone else is doing, but you're doing it much better and you know it. That can be your differentiator. Third is competition. Maybe you have nobody else in the same space who's doing anything similar. Then you can go wild with your pricing. If you look at Google Cloud and you try to turn on the free APIs, most of them are free to try out. You know which one is not? Google Maps. Because they know they have no competition there. If anyone's thinking Apple Maps, then you need to open the app and actually look at it. But Google Maps is sort of unparalleled with the market penetration and more importantly the consumer trust that they have. And that reflects in how they price their APIs. There's no free tier. You have to actually start paying for it because they can, there's no competition. So pick which of the C's is yours. Are you going to differentiate by cost, by capability, or by competition? And that should be the first step in figuring out your pricing. Next, figure out who your consumers are. For every API product that you're building, there are multiple types of people who are going to use it. Some are going to be hobby engineers, side project guys, student developers. These are not typically going to be paying users. Second, there can be small startups, mid-level enterprise companies who can pay but not very much. These are typically the guys who have Firebase bills around few thousand rupees a month. They will pay, but they cannot be your primary revenue stream unless you hit scale, but that's the second step. Third is enterprises, large-scale businesses, where cloud bills are in lakhs, sometimes hitting crores. That is also an important market segment. Make sure you have identified each of these and you have a different pricing approach for all of them. This is what you're seeing on that front page where you see separate pricings for personal and business and enterprise because their needs are very sharply defined. They know that enterprises require scale, yes, but more than anything, an enterprise client requires servicing. You go and tell a large company like TCS or Wipro, I'm going to give you so many GBs or so much data transfer. They will not be as happy as if you tell them that I'm going to have one guy sitting in your office all the time, ready to answer your problems. So they require servicing more than anything else. So figure out what each of these segments needs and offer that and price it accordingly. Next is pricing model. So you figure out who your customer audience is. You figure out what your differentiator is going to be. But you still have to decide how you're going to charge them. You can't just tell people, "Mujhe 50 rupees do mahine ka, and then I'll give you all my APIs." Right? There has to be various ways on how you price your product. One is classic usage-based pricing. For every API call that someone makes, you charge them a small amount, maybe 10 paisa, 20 paisa.
Right.
Typically, that's the pricing range for most small-scale APIs. It works when you're expecting volume. Best example for this is SMS-based apps. All send OTP SMSs for you. Typically, an SMS in India is priced at 7 paise or 10 paise based on the state. For international, it's about 60 paise to 3 rupees based on the country. Massively low pricing, but because of the amount of OTPs that are going out every day, these guys can hit profitability. This is usage-based pricing. The other is user-based pricing. So it doesn't matter how much someone uses it, but as long as one user is interacting with it, this is how much they will pay per user. This can be scaled up. It's not as cheap as usage-based, but it's easier for a business to estimate how many people are going to use it and how much it's going to cost me. It's not a very variable cost. Third is bulk pricing, which is what Ripple did for a while, because in an early stage startup, you can't really figure out this. It's very difficult to figure out how much my cloud bill is going to come and how much do I charge customers to balance out their cloud bill and make a profit and pay my employees. So typically in an early stage startup, you just do bulk pricing, which is exactly what I said earlier. However, it's not a cheap thing. You just overestimate, my cloud bill is coming 30,000-40,000, I'll charge a lakh, and I'll adjust all the other values. The reason I said don't do this is because it's very dangerous. It's very easy to lose a client because you can't justify why you're charging 1 lakh. Internally you know कि मुझे salaries भरना है, taxes भरना है, cloud bill भरना है, but you can't justify this to clients. So if you do go down this path, don't do it for more than 1 month, 2 months, not with more than 5 clients. And in your mind, make sure that you have a backup. If this doesn't work, you can also provide either usage-based or user-based pricing. And lastly, which is a model that has seen a lot of success in India, is revenue share pricing, which is what the Razorpays of the world do. For every transaction, they take 2% of your transaction. So they don't care about कितनी API calls है, कितने users है, कितना data transfer है, absolutely nothing. 2% of every transaction is a flat fee. Of course, based on volume, they adjust the percentage, but it's based on the amount of revenue that you make. Works fantastically because now your usage is also tied to how much the customer uses. However, it only works in a very certain niche, typically in payments or e-commerce. Again, like I said earlier, figure out your niche, figure out what works for them, and always have a free tier as well. For any SaaS product or an API product that wants to succeed, there has to be a way to prove yourself to a customer. If I come and tell you that I'm giving you something fantastic, but you can't try it, you have to pay for it first, you're going to laugh, and you're going to tell me time nahi hai, or you're going to just walk away. India, more than anywhere else, people want to try what before buying anything, right? Which is why we all love COD purchases. घर पे आता है, कार्टन खोल के देखेंगे, फिर पैसा देंगे. That's our core mentality, and that reflects even as you go up the chain. People want to try before they commit to anything. Even at scale, even enterprise companies want to try out, even though they have a lot of disposable cash. So keep a free model for your API, and beyond that, also have a freemium model. So typically, if you look at apps that charge you, like Netflix, YouTube, all of these guys that have subscriptions, they have a trial model. So they say 3 months you can try it out, and then you start paying for it. Historically, what has worked better in APIs is you give a free usage every month. Which is go and look at Firebase's pricing page, they explain this really well. For 10,000 users every month, you don't pay. Anything above that, you start paying. It gives a lot of incentive for everyone from startups to professionals to many enterprises to start using it, because they know that starting में bill नहीं आएगा. Right? They know that even if I use it for 6 months and I don't hit 10,000 users, I don't have to pay anything. Their success is then tied to your success. That if they want to scale above 10,000 users, they will have to pay you. So now they're invested in their own businesses succeeding, and your revenues are tied to their success, right? So it just works better than just a flat paid model. Lastly, and this is not just pricing, it's everything you're building in general, always do A/B testing of whatever you're building. If you haven't heard of the concept before, it's I will show 2 people 2 different things and see which person uses it more. For example, if you open airline, everyone heard of the myth, right? When you're looking at flight pricing, check in incognito also. Because if you keep checking the flight pricing on the same browser, they start hiking the price up because they know you're interested. Right? And the moment they see a new user, which is you in incognito, the price is the base again. They are testing that. They're not sure whether you'll commit or not. They're testing 2 pricing strategies and seeing which one works better. And a bunch of companies, almost every major one out there is testing something at all points. So even in your product, your pricing, make sure you're testing multiple price points with different consumers, and you're measuring which one does well, which one does better, and then you're refining. For example, on day 1 you have half your customers paying 40 rupees, the other half paying 50 rupees, and you see 40 is more famous. Can you bring your 50 down to 45 and see then the difference? This is not a one-time exercise, it's a journey. You will keep refining your pricing strategies, your product, your UI, everything undergoes testing and keeps getting better over time. After you have done all of that, and again coming back to this is pure entrepreneurship, API part is done. After you have done all of that, right, you figured out your pricing strategy, you figured out your niche, you figured out your target audience, you've raised funds, learn how to tell a story. I think anyone who wants to be a successful founder doesn't need any other skill. You don't need to be an engineer, you don't need to be a designer, you don't need to even be a businessman if you can tell a good story. Because that's ultimately what a sales pitch is. You're going to your investors and you're selling them something that has not been built, something that you're going to build, and you're convincing them to put money on the table. It's not a designer or an engineer or a sales guy's job. That's an entrepreneur's job. Right? And you're learning to tell a good story, which is describing your business or your product or your dream to someone in a limited amount of time in a way that you can capture their attention. That is just pure storytelling more than anything else. So if you are heading on a path where you want to become an entrepreneur, learn how to do this. There's no shortcut, there is no reading material, there is no way to just magically learn storytelling. It's just something you will get better over time. The only way to really get better at this is be conscious of everything you're seeing. So the moment you start stepping into a workplace or colleagues or even in college and you're communicating with everyone, think to yourself, can I see this better with lesser words, with better vocabulary, in a shorter amount of time? Keep that part of the back of your head all the time. Because not just storytelling, you also have to become a better communicator. Once you're a good communicator, storytelling is next. But become a good communicator first. Learn to be a storyteller. Some of the best founders in the world, and the most notable example is Airbnb. When Airbnb raised their initial round of funding, the investors didn't look at the pitch deck. They didn't look at the product. They just heard the founder's story and they put money on the table just for that. Some of the best products in the world out there have been built on pure storytelling. Make sure you're working out of that, because without this, the other stuff will not matter. Cool. Thanks so much. If you want to chat anytime about product strategy,